We're at noon and I can see people are still logging on, but I'm going to begin today's webinar. Um, my name is Paula Price. I am a lawyer turned executive coach, and I am the founder of Uplevel Lawyer Coaching and Uplevel CPD. And today we're going to talk about virtual networking for lawyers. So welcome everybody. I'm so glad to see you all here. This is really exciting. I have created this presentation. It is for lawyers and for students who want tools and strategies to help them network online. Obviously, we're in a bit of an unusual state. Since March, everybody has pretty much been transitioning to largely online. Some individuals are still reporting into offices, but for the most part, we are really relying on social media and technology to connect with other people. And the reason that I created this course is because of this webinar is because I keep hearing from a number of individuals that they have reservations when it comes to networking. So this is really in response to that, and I'll talk more about that as we get into the material. So today's presentation, I'm going to try to keep us at 45 minutes so that you can do this over lunch and have it not take up your whole day. We may run a few minutes over. I apologize in advance if that's the case. We'll do 30 minutes talking about networking. We'll have about 5 minutes where I'd like to tell you a bit about a course I'm offering in September, and I'm going to try for a 10-minute session of Q&A. In terms of questions and comments, I'd love your participation. I am going to have my Q&A and chat on sort of mute during the presentation just because I find it's really distracting. So what will happen is after the 5-minute presentation about the course, I'll open up Q&A and I'll have a look at chat, and that's when I'd really love to hear from you. The chat, you can just type in, that's more for comments. For questions, please type those into the Q&A field. If you see a question that you like, you can have it open on your window as we go through the presentation. If you see a question that somebody else asked that you like, please upvote it. That'll make it go to the top. And also you are able to submit questions anonymously if that's what you would like to do. So without further ado, I would just like to acknowledge I'm in Vancouver. I'd like to acknowledge that the territory from which I am presenting is the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, made up of the Musqueam First Nations, the Squamish Nation, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. And I'd also like to acknowledge all of you. Thank you so much for joining me today. It really is, it's such a treat, it's such a pleasure to be able to connect with you. So thank you so much for joining me today. And what it tells me is that there is an interest in connecting online, and in effect, that's what we're doing right now. So I'm excited to talk more about that. Now, I'm going to do a little bit about me, mostly because it's relevant to today's discussion. I am a lawyer by training. I practiced for over 12 years. I was a commercial litigator for most of that time, and I worked in an office, which is why I have this office tower over here. In 2017, I made a shift in my career. I had become really interested in coaching. I also had 2 young kids at home and a husband who travels for work. And I reached a point where I decided that what was best for my family, for me, and for my career was to find a way to work in a more flexible arrangement. So working at home. The image here is not my home. I wish I had fresh flowers by my desk every day. I don't. So I needed a way to be more flexible. And I also had decided that I wanted to have a business that was more based online. I really loved how the internet was able to connect people, and I wanted to be able to use that professionally. So a little bit about me, just to orient the experience that I have in terms of operating online. And I think that's relevant because I chose to work online in 2017. I chose to work mainly from home. For many of you, 2020 brought that on without your input. And while you may appreciate some aspects of it, it may not have been your choice. So anyhow, Networking online, I think, or what I'm going to tell you today, there's more to it, obviously, but to cover in about 25 minutes, I think there's really 5 questions that you need to ask yourself. So we're going to go through those 5 questions in order. And the first question is, how do you define networking? And sorry, on the previous slide, there was a pencil. If you are able to make some notes, I would recommend writing down the questions and, better yet, your answers, because this may serve as a useful tool for you going forward. So the first question is, how do you define networking? And the reason I think this is the place to start is because this is where I see most individuals, mostly lawyers that I'm speaking with, but also other individuals, have a lot of resistance. And the word networking, I think, brings a lot of negative connotations to mind. And so I've written a number of those on the screen, and people will say, you know, I don't know about this networking thing. It feels so superficial. I'm just really not into that whole scene. One of the major differences, obviously, is that we no longer have the opportunity for social gatherings the way that we used to. So networking used to be something that, in my mind, conjured up conferences, seminars, cocktail parties, where your networking was really about shaking hands, having a business card handy, making small talk. And that really isn't how people are networking these days. And so not only does networking carry all those connotations that it's had for some time, there's also that additional element of, how do you even go about doing it? So I hear the resistance, and what I want to suggest is that there is a better way, another way at least, to think about networking in a way that sets us up for more successful outcomes and that actually makes us want to do this. So, you know, I spoke with someone the other day who said, we were talking about networking, and he said, it's just not for me. And, you know, I didn't argue with him. I mean, that's his opinion, but it's also a little bit disappointing, because you think there's so many opportunities, there's so many people out there that you could be meeting. Please don't let that hold you back. So when it comes to your definition of networking, here's how you may be able to think about it a little bit differently. So I've put a few quotes up here, probably more than you can read in a few minutes, but the starting point really is about thinking about it from the perspective of building relationships. I love meeting new people, so maybe I'm already starting in a place where I'm naturally inclined to want to network. But I look at networking as an opportunity to meet more people. I look at it as an opportunity to build relationships with people. I look at it as an opportunity to learn more about what's going on around me, and also to raise awareness about the work that I'm doing and how I may be able to help other people. This one quote, networking is more about farming than it is about hunting. What that really says to me is the longevity of the relationships that you form through networking. And so I can tell you that in 2017, some of the people that I reached out to were at the time strangers, and some of them now I count in my closer circle of friends. And so it really is something that progresses over time. I have connections, professional connections that I met, over, a dozen years ago. It's the long game. I think looking at the networking as these quotes reflect, more from a position of, what is the benefit? What is the relationship? How is this going to help me support others, as well as help find people to support me? All these things are ways of reframing the way that we look at networking, so that we don't necessarily associate with it the negative connotations that we typically associate with networking. So that really is step one. One note as well, another objection that I often hear, especially now, is we're in the middle of a pandemic. People are too stressed, they are too busy, and they are too important to listen to me or to have time for me. And I want to acknowledge that yes, there will be some people who are out there who are too stressed, who are too busy, and who are too important to respond to you if you reach out to them. I think that is just how life is, right? And I would suggest not to let that hold you back. I know for myself, when I first started doing anything online, I think it was before I had been promoting a particular course that I did, I thought to myself, I'm going to be rejected. There are people who are not going to like this work. And so I gave myself percentages. I said 30% of the people may like me. Wouldn't that be great? 30% of the people will probably hate me. That's not so great, but that's just how it is. And everybody in the middle will probably think nothing at all. So if you allow yourself to define ahead of time or to set the expectation that yes, there are going to be some efforts that you make that will result in the forming of a connection, and there are some efforts that you make that will fall flat, it may help you to digest and process and be okay with the fact that that's how it will unfold. The other piece that I often hear about is, well, there aren't any networking events anymore. How am I supposed to network? And that is why you need to create those events for yourself. And events or interactions, you need to be intentional and deliberate about networking at this stage. So we'll talk about how you go about doing that next. That brings us to the second question, which is, what are you trying to do? I speak with lawyers at all different stages of their careers. I speak with a number of law students. I speak with a number of lawyers who are recent calls or a few years into their practice where they're starting to think, the course I'm on isn't exactly how I want to continue. I'd like to start looking at what other opportunities are out there. And I also speak with lawyers who are wrapping up almost the first phase of their career. So this I've heard quite often from lawyers who work in government, for example, where there's a certain age that is considered a retirement age, and they are approaching that stage with a view of moving into private practice, doing something a little bit different, which may require getting into a new field of law, developing a new expertise. And so at all different stages, the networking piece becomes relevant for specific purposes. Now, I've been saying this, I realize networking isn't something that I would consider to be an event that you do and then you stop doing it. I think it's something that is useful and you should be doing throughout your career because it really is enriching for you and for those around you. And it can make your professional life really enjoyable when you have more people to share it with. So I've put a notepad and pencil image here because it really does start with creating a list. So if I take it back to my example in 2017, I knew I wanted to make a change. I knew I wanted to do a form of work that was probably not an office job. And so I made a list of, so that was one of the things is what does a contract or a non-traditional law practice look like? I knew I was interested in potentially doing research law. I knew I was interested in doing maybe a niche area. And one of the niches that I thought about was maybe estate litigation. So I'd created these categories of work that I was interested in. Of course, there was also the coaching. And so I made, different categories of coaching, professionals who support lawyers. I made a list. These are the areas that I'm interested in because that was the what I wanted to do. Your list will look quite different. Maybe it's I'm seeking an articling position and I want to know what law firms I should be contacting, who I can reach out to. Maybe you are one of those early stage lawyers and you're thinking, okay, I've been practicing in this one area. It's really not fulfilling for me. What I want to do is explore bankruptcy and insolvency. So make your list nice and specific. And once you have that framework, you would be ready to move on to the next stage, which is to ask yourself the next question. Who do you need to reach out to? With this question, I recommend starting fairly broad. So looking at categories. So if you look at, for example, I was looking at part-time legal practice. Okay, well, what does that look like? Where am I going to, maybe it's contract lawyers, maybe it's lawyers who work independently, maybe it's sole practices, maybe it's lawyers who work within law firms who have a part-time arrangement. You're wanting to look at what are the broad categories. And once you have those in terms of, and you may also look at committees, for example, or CBA sections. If there's an area of law that you're interested in, you may think about those. So think about the categories of places that you may find people, and then you're going to take the next step, which is to identify individuals who fit into each of those categories. So you can start with the people that you already know. If you're a law student, that might be other students who have been either who are in your year, or maybe students who are in years above you. If you are a practicing lawyer, there might be lawyers within your law firm that you can speak with, or your professional connections outside of your law firm. If you are at the senior levels, you may have all sorts of connections. You may also ask about their connections. And in this regard, you need to tread somewhat carefully. It depends on the level of friendship that you have with the person who you're asking. If you call somebody after 5 years and say, hey, do you know anybody doing such and such? They may sort of feel a little bit taken advantage of. So you want to be careful that you're acknowledging the person that you're speaking with, and that you're not imposing too much on somebody where you haven't had a very strong relationship. Research is huge. So my background, when I was practicing law, I loved research. I still love research. And when I went about my transition in 2017, I did a ton of it. And for lawyers, law firm websites are a wealth of information. I found that the continuing professional development papers were wonderful. So CLEBC has a number of productions and publications, and they were amazing for identifying experts in the fields, papers written by sole practitioners, research lawyers, all of the people that I was interested in learning about. I could actually look at their work. The internet is amazing. So there are articles online, there are blogs, there are webinars like this one. And then LinkedIn, of course, is also a place where you can go to learn about who is out there that is doing the work that you're interested in doing. So once you have started that process, again, I've got this little icon here with a piece of paper and a pencil. Make a list, make lots and lots of lists, because you are going to want to create a list of all the people that you're interested in reaching out to. And go broad, because you may not contact all these people, but you want to know who it is that you are going to approach. So I did this back in 2017. I created lists and lists and lists of all the people that I wanted to meet. I found names on websites. I had names through personal contacts. If you have a friend who is very well connected, reach out. And this is a person you have a relationship with. They can be a wonderful source of connections. The research part is really fun. Find as many people as possible, and those will be your lists. From that stage, we get to how you will make contact. And I suspect this is where a lot of lawyers and individuals are a little bit tripped up these days, right? Here we are in COVID. How do I go about doing that? And I will tell you that the good news and the bad news is that you don't have a lot of choices. So your mediums right now, I think, are mainly email, LinkedIn, the telephone, and Zoom or Zoom-like teleconferences. And the wonderful thing about this is that, number one, you have very few choices, so you don't have to give it very much thought. More importantly, with everybody connecting virtually, I think it has really leveled the playing field, and you can reach out to more people. You can reach out to people who otherwise would have been physically too far away from you. And so the world really has opened up. And I think people seem, at least, to be more open to the idea of networking online and connecting online, because we are all in this state of togetherness. We're kind of fighting the other. And that can really work to your advantage when you're trying to meet new people. So when it comes to actually networking, these are your options. When it comes to initiating a relationship with somebody or initiating contact with somebody, my preference is email and LinkedIn. For me, those are reasonably safe ways to do it. You send the note, the people who are on the other side have a chance to think about and respond to you. And from there, you have options. I mean, that might be the extent of your connection. That happens with me. To give an example, a couple of recent examples, there's a woman who reached out to me on LinkedIn recently who's into podcasting, and she just, said hello, and I wrote me a short note, and I wrote her a short note. I said, it's great you're into podcasting. It's something that I've thought about. It's not on my agenda anytime soon, but I have thought about it, and I may circle back later in the future. So for us, this email exchange over LinkedIn is all we really need. Now I know that if somebody or myself is interested in creating a podcast, I know somebody who I can reach out to. I don't need to have a follow-up conversation in person with her. Um, Another individual reached out recently on LinkedIn who, after we connected, said, I usually have a 15-minute conversation with people that I meet online. Would you like to do that? And he's in a similar industry to me. Thought, sure, why not? I'd love to learn more about what he's doing and how we may have ways of complementing each other in our work. And so I said, yes, sure. And so we'll have a conversation. So there are different levels of connection that you may be making with people in your network, and that will really depend on what you are trying to accomplish through the relationship that you seek to make. So when it comes to the steps and initiating contact, that really is your first point, is what do you want to, what are you trying to do here? And for your initial contact, I recommend keeping it brief. I think sometimes you may, or I know I've done this, spend time writing a pretty long introduction thinking that it's a sign of respect and showing my interest and all that. Um, you do want to show interest, you do want to show respect, but the reality is, especially now when we're all communicating online, everything is virtual. Emails that are long, notes that are long, to me, they tend to be overwhelming. I look at them and I think, where am I going to have the time to read all this? How do I respond to this? So my recommendation is for that initial contact, for it to be brief. I also recommend for it to be genuine. If you are, sort of copying and pasting some sort of email, it tends to have that that sense. It's almost like intuitive. And when I receive emails or LinkedIn messages that I feel are kind of copied and pasted, I tend not to pay as much attention to them as I do to the emails that are, like I said, the short, more genuine connections. And so be mindful of that as you're creating that first initial contact. Brief, you might highlight something about why you're contacting them. If you have a mutual connection, great, you can mention that. Better yet, have the mutual connection introduce the two of you. I have found that increases the chances of somebody responding if they have that introduction, if they know that you know somebody. If you are contacting them because maybe there's something that they've done that you really admire. So back in 2017, I found a lawyer who had written this wonderful CLE paper on how to grow a practice. And I thought, this is an amazing paper. So I emailed him and I told him how much I enjoyed his paper. And he wrote back right away. We had a lunch date. This was a different era where lunches were more common. We had a chance to connect. It was the beginning of a lovely interaction, a lovely exchange. So if you can highlight something that people have done in their work, it tends to be really well received. I can tell you, especially online, some of you have reached out to me, and thank you. I really, really appreciate it. When you are working on the online space, you don't always know how things are being received. So if somebody has written an article or they're doing a webinar and they don't have any feedback, it can feel a little bit like working in a vacuum. So to the point at the beginning of this presentation about not wanting to impose on people, to the contrary, sometimes you reaching out to somebody is exactly the connection that they wish that they had. So keep that in mind in your initial contact, that the energy that you bring to your email, what you say, can have a really positive impact on that person, as well as creating that initial exchange that you can build on. So keep it brief, keep it short. And if what you're seeking is some sort of an exchange, a phone call, a Zoom conversation, invite them to that. Say, hi, I saw your article that you posted on LinkedIn. I really liked this point that you made. my name, my name is, you probably already said your name is whatever. I'm interested in learning more about X. Would you have 20 minutes for a conversation? So something like that. Now, like I said earlier, you may not get a response. You can decide whether or not you want to follow up on that. If you don't get a response, please don't take it personally. I think this is just normal. People are busy. They just may not have time. Don't lose hope. And if they do respond and you find yourself now in the zone of setting up a phone date or a Zoom date, I recommend doing whatever heavy lifting is required. So if it's a Zoom invitation, be the one to send it unless they've already got it set up and they are too quick for you. Try to make it easy for them. When you do have your interaction, make a plan. So think about in advance what it is that you want to learn from that person. And think about what it is that you want to say about yourself. The conversation really will be about them, but what are a couple of things that you would like to mention? And think about how you can make that conversation pleasant for them, right? So you don't need a script to follow. People can sometimes tell if you're reading off your script. It doesn't have to be like that, but the purpose of the exercise of writing down the questions is to think ahead of time about what you would like to learn from that person. You don't want there to be awkward silences, so make sure you have enough material that you can avoid that. And then you're basically ready. You go ahead and you're ready for your conversation. One other thing is when it does come to talking about yourself, if you are a job seeker, you can certainly mention that, but I would try to stay away from putting too much pressure on that person to talk about jobs or to say, yes, I have a job. The more sort of they will understand from the nature of your conversation that that's what you are looking for. You may suggest to them, if you hear of anything, I'd love to know. But try not to make the conversation all about how can they help you get a job. You might ask them questions that are more along the lines of, how did you get to where you are? What do you find interesting about your work? What do you find challenging about your work? What advice would you have for somebody at my stage? So again, you want to keep it conversational, keep it about them, and try not to put them in a position where they may feel awkward because they're not able to deliver on something that you've asked for. So number 3, ask questions and listen. So again, going back to the conversation, as you ask the questions, make sure that you listen to the answers. There is something that is really wonderful about being asked questions and given an opportunity to speak. As a lawyer, we ask questions. As a coach, I ask a lot of questions. And as somebody, and I love questions. I think questions are a wonderful tool, especially when it's about exploring and thinking about your career, for example. And I think for some people, that whole exercise of speaking with somebody can be really enjoyable because they probably don't think about it on a regular basis. Like, what is challenging, or what do I love about my work? How did I get here? What advice would I give? I mean, these are questions that might be really enjoyable for them to answer. So please listen to the answers. If you do have a script, feel free to go off your script. If they mention something that you find really interesting, let yourself go there, because those are clues that there may be more, you may have more in common than you realize. This may be, the foundation of a deeper relationship. So I recommend listening to the answers and really giving audience to the person who is speaking. Number 4 is show appreciation and give back. So this is really all about thanking the person for their time, thinking of ways that you can reciprocate. What can you do for them? And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a different slide. Number 5, reflect and learn. So once you get off the phone, get off your Zoom call, ask yourself a few questions. Think about, how did that go? What went well in this conversation? What might I do differently next time? It's really a great opportunity for you to reflect and learn and get better at this. This really is a skill that you practice. You might also think about what the takeaways are from that conversation. And finally, follow up. So if you do speak with somebody and they give you some good advice, or maybe they initiate a connection with somebody else, go back to that person and tell them how it went. Thank them. Keep in touch with them. I don't think there's any hard and fast rule about how often you reconnect with a contact. I think it really is it depends on the circumstances. It depends on the relationship that you form with that person. You may form a really close relationship, in which case you will be naturally just continuing on that relationship. It may be that the conversation is totally pleasant, but it ends there. And so accepting each interaction for what it is wonderful. But if there's an opportunity to follow up and to tell them, thank you, the advice you gave me was really helpful, or, I learned this thing, or if you find something that you think they would like, absolutely follow up with them. And that brings us to our last question, which is, what value can you share with others? So in my life and in my professional life, I tend to look at the world as a bit of a bucket. It's a bucket where I contribute, and it's a bucket where I take. And I try to give as much as I can, and I try to take what I need, I guess, is a way of putting it. And the interesting thing about my bucket is that the relationships aren't always equal. And what I mean by that is there may be somebody who really, really helps me out, and I may not be able to give back to them in the way that I wish that I could give back to them. But there may be another relationship that I have where I give a lot to somebody and they have no way of giving anything back to me, and that's okay. And the whole ecosystem of it all is that I truly believe that what you give, you will also receive, kind of like a boomerang. You send it out, it comes back. And the objective is to really look for opportunities where you can be of service. And so I've put an image of the scales of justice, because lawyers love the scales of justice. And it's really about finding that balance. And the balance really is to everybody's favor when we are all looking for ways to be in service of others. So when it comes to giving back, I have some ideas here. Number one is to share information. So speaking, for example, we're not doing these in-person conferences, but as you can see, as we're doing right now, Zoom and other similar platforms provide an excellent opportunity to share information with others and to share it broadly. And I highly recommend doing it. It is a wonderful way to share information and to connect with others. It is also a wonderful way of bringing people to you. It is a magical thing when I hear from people who attend or who are interested in the topics that I'm speaking about. I really, really love hearing from you. And what's neat is that it brings people to you. Same with writing. People sometimes, if you're able to write, if you're able to publish if you can publish articles that are related to your practice area, for example. It's a way of putting a message out there that shares information and also has, in some cases, the benefit of bringing people to you. Offering materials, there was a young lawyer on LinkedIn who recently shared a CV and cover letter template, and it was wonderful because who doesn't want to see a really good example of a cover letter and CV that they may use when creating their own. So offering these types of things in a somewhat public way, it's a way of giving back, and it's also a way of bringing people into your world that are people that you want to have there. Promoting others. So this is really a big one, I think. Number one, you might mentor other people. So you may feel that you're not in a position to mentor anybody. Maybe you're a student just starting out. Maybe you're a senior lawyer and you think, well, I don't know what I have to share. Believe me, you have something to share with so many people. And so finding opportunities where you can mentor others is really a wonderful, satisfying way of giving back. Studies have shown, there's some gratitude or some happiness studies that show, that giving is really the most pleasurable for the person who is in the position of the giver. And so, I mean, it's sort of a selfish reason, but it's not a bad reason. I mean, there's lots and lots of ways to give to others, and mentoring is one of them. So don't shy away from opportunities like that. It also gives you an opportunity to be in the position of the mentor and to see in your mentee or mentees what kinds of communications you really enjoy and appreciate. And you, in turn, when you're having interactions with people who are your mentors, you have a better understanding of what will resonate with them. I'll give an example. When I was a younger lawyer, I don't think that I gave very many compliments to senior lawyers because I always assumed that they didn't need them, right? They know what they're doing. They're senior. They know everything. Now, when I receive compliments from students or people who I'm working with, I find it really, really wonderful. It helps me know what I'm doing well. It helps inform me in terms of where I want to go with my work. It means a lot to me. And so I now try to really emphasize that, because I learned that even people who may seem like they're further ahead than you and maybe don't need that feedback, that feedback can be really powerful. So there's an example. Promote others on social media. So I'm not really going in depth on social media. I mentioned earlier the platform that I use professionally is LinkedIn. I really like it. One thing that I noticed about LinkedIn is that there were some, sometimes I felt a little bit sad. I would go on there and I would see all these posts about people and all the wonderful things they're doing. And I thought, I kind of feel by comparison that I'm just not doing enough. And what I realized is that posting on LinkedIn isn't necessarily about posting all the things that you're doing. I think it's wonderful to post the things you're doing, and I do post the things that I'm doing. But I think it's a little bit like imagining yourself in a real life social situation. So if you're at a party, you probably wouldn't sit there and talk about how great you are all the time without turning the conversation around and asking somebody how they're doing. So when you're on LinkedIn or other forms of social media, I really like to go and see what other people are doing and contribute to what they're doing online. I ask them questions in the comments field, or I like things that they're doing, or if I see something that I think would be that I can share with my network that would help them out, I will share it. So promoting others online, I think, is really, really important. It's not just about what you're doing, it's about what are other people doing and how can I promote them. And this is particularly applicable to the people who come in as your mentors. How can you help them? And finally, connect people. So if you speak with somebody and you think, wow, I could certainly connect you with somebody and this would be a really helpful connection for you to have, do it. Same thing with ideas, same thing with opportunities. One area where I've been able to do this is with speaking engagements. I sit on a committee with, I sit on in a number of positions actually, where I've been able to kind of promote or help people with speaking engagements. And it's been a really wonderful way of finding the right person to speak with the right audience, and everybody benefits from things like that. So figure out what it is that's in your bailiwick that you can help connect people with and do those things. Now I realize we are really moving ahead on time. I had hoped to be sort of done by 12:45, and we're probably going to go a little bit over. So I'm just going to rush through the last slide, which is a recap, tell you quickly about my course, and then turn it over to Q&A. So thank you for bearing with me. In summary, the 5 points we covered is: how do you define network? So your perspective, your mindset is everything. Try to choose a definition that is empowering and makes you want to go out there and increase your network. Number 2, what are you trying to do? So be purposeful and intentional in what your goals are. Number 3, who do you need to reach out to? So again, that exercise of finding who it is. 4, how will you make contact? So again, where mediums are not plentiful, so think about how you want to use the ones we have. And 5, what value will you share with others? How are you going to give back? I've summarized this a little bit in the do's and don'ts. Do, be positive, have a plan, be brief, give back. Do not fear rejection, totally normal. And it's not really rejection, it's probably just people are busy, and that's okay. Try not to overinform. So these are the long emails. Try not to create work. So as much as you can carry the burden of setting things up and that sort of thing, please do that. And don't give up. Just because you don't, get the results that you want the first time, go through that exercise of reflecting, thinking about what you've done, how you might do things differently, and keep going, because this is, we're in our careers for the long haul. We're in this, this virtual environment for the foreseeable future. You will find a way. If you keep at it, you will find a way. So before we turn to Q&A, I would like to tell you a little bit about a course that I'm offering. It's Uplevel Professionalism Core Skills for Lawyers, and it is a 6-week program. It is approved for CPD credit by the Law Society of British Columbia. It is a course that I started offering this summer for law students, partly because I've been wanting to create a platform, an environment to bring people together, students in particular, over the summer. And especially once the pandemic struck, I wanted to be able to create an online space for people to connect. I also want to teach some of the skills and the tools that I wish that I had had as a younger lawyer, much of which is informed by my experience practicing law, and also informed by my experience getting trained as an executive coach and working with lawyers and seeing the challenges that lawyers face throughout, right? It's not just the students who have these challenges, it's the young lawyers, it's the middle stage lawyers. In some cases, it's the senior lawyers too. So I created a 6-week program. This is the first time I'm offering it to lawyers as well. I think it would be really suitable for junior lawyers, for articling students, some students who may be in sort of the gray zone between school and work. And what I do is I really dive in to 6 different sections of or 6 different skills that I think are really important for developing a practice of professionalism, and one that is really driven by you. One trend or thing or hiccup that I've seen among lawyers is that we tend to come out of law school with everything being shaped for us. Some of us will join firms where that continues to be shaped for us, but to be really successful in your career, and this applies not just to lawyers, this is really for everybody. I think those who are really successful are the ones who really do the work at the outset or at some time to figure out what it is that they want to do, what they are passionate about, what really motivates them, and then set on a course where they are aligning what they do with their values and what they really want to accomplish. So I take that and I apply it in the context of law at the beginning stages, medium stages, where you happen to be. So it's 6 weeks. The first week is about goal setting. So we look at the environment in which you are practicing or working, and look at what the skills are that you need to be successful. We also look at goal setting. So there's a whole, I love goal setting, especially because there's so many different types of goals. There are the long-term goals, there's the shorter-term goals, there are the impossible goals that you set for yourself because they are inspiring, and the short little easy to get goals because they give you that sense of satisfaction, they build momentum. So there's a whole range of goals. We talk about that in the first week. The second week is about connections. So that's really going further on the topic that we talked about today. That is looking at your career and thinking about who you want to bring into it. If you're in a law firm, that may be the relationships that you're building with people who are in your firm. If you are not, it may be some other ways of looking at building your relationships outside. Who do you need? Who do you want in your network? Going back to people who are in law firms, your network doesn't have to be contained to just your law firm. It's, who outside of your law firm do you also want to be connected with? So we spend some time on that, spend some time on strategies. The third week is time management. something that I get very excited about. So looking at how you spend your time, is it allocated in alignment with your goals? How do you do it? Are you being efficient with your time? So we look at all sorts of fun time strategies, procrastination. It really is, I'm a time management geek. I love it. And then we move into writing the following week, which I also love. And the real crux of the writing is making that distinction between academic writing that makes for a very successful student and shifting that to a more practical style of writing that makes for a very successful person in a professional context. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about how to organize your thoughts, how to write effectively, clearly, all those things. And then the following week, we build further on that by moving into speaking. And speaking in a professional context is not just public speaking in the way that we consider it, like speaking at a conference or going to court, a TED Talk. I mean, speaking really is the interactions that you have every day. It's the visit to the partner's office or Zoom office, whatever the case may be, and how you present. Are you instilling confidence? Are you able to communicate your ideas in a clear way? It is about creating a relationship of trust. It's talking to clients. It's figuring out how you take your thoughts and communicate them clearly. And then the last week is week 6, that's feedback. And that's where we get to do a deep dive into how you go about seeking feedback, how you interpret feedback, how you deal with negative feedback, particularly in the moment, and how you take positive feedback and use that to leverage yourself and grow. So, and you know, the fun thing about all this is that if you had a hexagon, you could actually see that the process then becomes cyclical. After you've received the feedback, you bring yourself back to your goals, and you can kind of repeat this in a way, and it just continues to build on itself. So these are core skills to develop in starting out your practice. So the course itself that I'm offering, it's an hour every week on Zoom. I have assignments that I give students. They are optional because I recognize that not everybody has the time to do these things, but if you can do them, you will get more out of the course. I do the lessons on Zoom. They are recorded, so if you cannot make it, which I understand will happen if you're in practice or may happen, they're recorded. You can go back to them. It starts September 9th. This cycle will be Wednesdays at noon. The course is approved for CPD credit, and so it's 6 hours of CPD credit, and it does count for the 2 hours of professionalism and ethics. The cost of the course is $189 plus, sorry, that's including GST. And I've tried to set it at a price that is affordable for people. If it's an issue, but you're really keen to take the course, let me know. And I have here the URL, which is probably not very helpful because it's so long. Probably the easiest thing is just to go to the Uplevel CPD website and find it through there. I'll also send a link to those who registered for today's webinar. I will be sending you a link to the recording of the webinar as well as a link to the course. So with all that being said, I'm going to bring us in to Q&A. I just need to see if we have any questions. And there are no open questions. So if you do have questions, please type them in. I believe you can put them in anonymously. I'm also going to check on the chat. Here we go. And I have no chat either. So I guess with there being no questions and no chat, I really don't have anything else to add. Oh, here we go. Would this course be suitable for someone based in Ontario? Yes, absolutely. The wonderful thing about us being virtual is that we can do all of this online. So yes, the timing would be a little bit different. It'd be 3 in the afternoon, but I would say most of the students that I had over the summer were from all over Canada. So yes, absolutely. I don't have the CPD accreditation for Ontario. I could apply for it, but I haven't done that yet. Oh, I see there's another question. Oh, thank you, Samantha. Does anybody else have questions? Okay, so it looks like with, I think what I will do then is I'm going to end today's webinar. Hopefully this set you up for being more comfortable networking online. If you, one of the goals that I had, I forgot to say this at the beginning, was for everybody to feel more comfortable and to go out after this webinar and to practice some of this and to make some connections online. And if you do that, absolutely, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to share. Oh, thank you so much, Anique. Wonderful. Yeah, so absolutely. If you do reach out to anybody, I'd love to hear about it. I have plans as well to apply some of my own tips and do a little bit of networking myself. So please feel free to share any experiences that you have. If you have any questions, I would love to hear them. You know, please feel free to reach out to me. Love to be added or add you to my LinkedIn network or anything like that. So yeah, please feel free to stay connected. So thank you, and thank you, Vidisha. Thank you, Tina. I really appreciate. Thank you so much to for your comments, and hope you all are doing well. And thanks again. Bye for now.